Hello students, title of today's lecture is electron microprobe. Electron microprobe is also a type of electron beam technique. You know that in case of electron beam techniques for the characterization of materials, what happens? A electron beam interact with the sample material, and during its interaction many possibilities occurs. There may be reflection of the electrons, there may be transmission, absorption or emission of new radiation. So in today's lecture, we are going to discuss about a electron microprobe technique, which is a E-beam technique for the characterization of the semiconductor materials. So in this technique, electron beam when interact with the solid surface, X-rays are emitted and these X-rays are used to characterize the material. So that possibility is summarized here. An electron beam having electron energy from 5 to 20 kilo electron volt. So this much energy of electrons, when they interact with this solid surface, X-rays are emitted, and these X-rays we are going to use for the characterization of material. Now the X-rays which are emitted from this the sample material, these X-rays have energies which are characteristics of the element from which they originate. Means different kind of elements will produce different X-ray energies. So just by analyzing the energy of X-rays, it is possible to identify the element which is generating the X-ray signal. So that way we can identify different kind of elements which are present in the sample material. Now this electron microprobe, so its name is electron microprobe. It is also known as electron probe microanalysis, and in short form we can write it EPM or EPMA, means electron probe microanalysis. So this phenomena was first time described by scientist Casting in his doctoral thesis in 1948, and it is very useful technique for the characterization of materials, and mainly we are concerned with the semiconductor materials. So now we will see what is the working principle of electron microprobe. You know that the atom have electrons moving around the nucleus in different orbits. Now when an incident electron having energy from 5 to 20 kilo electron volt knocks electron out of K shell. For example, this is an external stimulation, means an external electron. When it hit another electron which is present in the K shell, so it will knock this electron out of the atom. So the electron that has been knocked out, so it means a vacancy will be created here, and in order to fill this vacancy, electron from the higher orbit, and in this particular case this higher orbit is L orbit. So from this L orbit, the electrons will go to the lower orbit in order to fill this vacancy. So the L shell electron falls into this vacancy, and because of this, what happens? Because of this transition, energy is emitted, because an electron have moved from high energy shell to low energy shell, and because of this process energy is emitted, and this energy is a electromagnetic radiation, and if that electromagnetic radiation falls in the X-ray region of the electromagnetic spectrum, then we say that now that electron microprobe is working now. Now this is the case of an individual atom, but you know that most of the time we don't work with the individual atoms, we work with the solid materials, and in solid materials we talk about energy bands instead of energy levels. So one such case is shown here. This is the example of silicon. So here you can see that there is a conduction band, there is a valence band, and their L shells are shifted in two different levels, and there is K level, or you can say K shell. So a primary electron whose energy lies in this range 5 to 20 kilo electron volt, when it hits an electron which is present into the K orbit, so that electron will be knocked out of its position, and that way we get a vacancy here. and this vacancy will be filled by another electron at higher level in the K shell. And when this transition occurs from L shell to K shell, so electromagnetic energy is emitted, and if this energy lies in the area in the range of X-rays in the electromagnetic spectrum, then we say that it's electron microprobe system, right? Now the energy which comes out of the atom or comes out of the solid because of this transition from one level to the lower level. So this energy is characteristics of the element, because different elements have different atomic arrangement, and because of that different atomic arrangement, the energy which comes out of the atom during this transition, that energy, X-ray energy, is also different, and that X-ray energy is actually can be used for the identification of the elements. So that is very important point that makes it possible to identify the different kind of elements which are present into the sample. Now another important thing which you should understand here is that in this particular case we have considered that the transition have taken place from L shell to K shell, but it is not always the same case, depending on the element and depending on its depending on the distribution of electrons in the various orbits of that element. Many kind of transitions are possible. For example, if the transition is from L to K shell, which is the case in the example which we have discussed just before, so that transition generates X-rays, and those X-rays are named as K alpha X-rays. So K is the lower level. So from this higher level to this lower level transition have occurred. So that's why this transition is known as K, but it's named as alpha also, like K alpha X-rays. Similarly, if the transition occurs from L level to K level, so it is shown here. So this is M level, outer level is M level, and the innermost orbit here is K level. So if the transition occurs from this M to K, so this is indicated here, this portion, so that kind of transition occurs. That transition also involves emission of X-rays, and those X-rays are known as K beta X-rays. Again you see K is here because K is the lower orbit to which the transition have occurred. So this is the destination of the electron. Here also destination was K shell, so that's why it was K alpha. Here also destination is K, so K is there in the name, but beta is there because now this transition is not from L to K, it is from M to K. Similarly, if the transition occurs from M level to L level, for example here this is the outermost orbit, this is M level and this is L level. So if transition occurs from this outermost orbit to this middle orbit, so this transition is indicated here. If that kind of transition is there, then this transition also involves emission of X-rays, and these X-rays are known as L alpha X-rays. You see, the destination orbit is L orbit, so this middle orbit is L orbit, so the L is there in the name, but it is known as L alpha X-rays, right. So depending on the atomic arrangement, we have different X-ray energy which comes out of the atom, and all these different X-rays they are named in a different way, right. So you can see that it is possible that from a single element multiple transitions can occur. The transition may be from L to K level, or from M to L level, or from M to K level, and that way there are other possibilities also. So depending on the type of transition which occurs into the element when it interacts with the incoming electron, then we have different possibilities of X-ray radiations which comes out. So what we have to do, we have to identify the energy of these X-rays, and once we identify the energy of X-rays, then we can use those energies to identify that particular element from a unknown sample, right. Now that possibility is represented here also. If the transition is from M to L level, the X-rays which comes out, they are named as L alpha X-rays. If the transition is from L to K, the X-rays which comes out, they are named as K alpha X-rays. And if the transition is from M to K, then the radiations or the X-rays, they are named as K beta X-rays. Now the energy which comes out normally is measured as the difference of energy of the two levels in which the transition is taking place. For example, if the transition is taking place from L to K, from here to here, in that case the energy which comes out is the difference of energy of K orbit minus energy in case of L to 3 orbit, right. So this is the energy of X-rays which comes out because of this transition from higher orbit to lower orbit. Now many times instead of energy we talk in term of wavelength. So if we want to find out wavelength of the X-rays, that also is possible. We can do with the help of this formula. This is the formula which you have studied in your school physics. So once you know the energy, so all this is constant. So just put the energy value here and you can find out the wavelength of the X-rays which comes out of the material. And this wavelength, this wavelength is the signature of the element, because an element will produce a particular wavelength if it is present into the material. And once we identify that wavelength, we can identify the material which is producing that particular wavelength. Now another important thing which you should remember, that the energy between K and L level is much higher than the energy difference between L and M level. You can see here also the gap between M and L is small, this energy gap is small, and if we see the energy gap between this L and K, this energy gap is much larger than this ML energy gap, right. So it means if this transition is occurring, we will get less energy, and if this transition is occurring, we will get higher energy. So the energy between K and L level is much higher than between L and M level. Now let us consider one example. Now suppose there is a sample, and in that sample iron atoms are present, or some trace impurities of iron is present, and we want to identify whether iron is present or not. So for that we have to do this electron microprobe analysis, and we will get this kind of spectrum there. Now you see, three different peaks are present at three different energies. So I told you that in a single element multiple transitions are possible, and corresponding to all those transitions we have a X-ray energy. For example, there is K alpha energy is there, this K beta peak is there, and L alpha peak is there, and you can see that highest peak is in case of K beta transition, and K beta transition, you know, it's from M to K. So this is the largest energy gap in this present case, that is from M to K, and that's why the K beta energy is at 7057 electron volt. If we talk about K alpha peak, the K alpha transition, you know, it's from L to K, so it means this energy is smaller than the energy evolved in case of M to K transition. So that's why here the energy is less, 6400 electron volt, and this L alpha is from M to L, and you can see that out of the three transitions which we have discussed in case of iron here, so this is the smallest gap from M to L. So that's why this energy, this peak is at 704 electron volt energy. You see, if you get this kind of spectrum, so you can identify that this spectrum corresponds to the presence of iron into the sample material. So I think now you understand that how we identify the presence of an element into a sample with the help of X-rays which comes out of the material when the material interact with the high energy electron beam, or you can say that the electron microprobe equipment produces that kind of signal when this electron beam interact with the sample, and that signal which comes out, that can be used to ensure or to check the presence of this iron impurities into the sample material. Now, from where this signal comes out, this EMP electron microprobe signal. So, you know that in case of scanning electron microscope or in case of Auger electron spectroscopy, the signal generates from the sample when electron beam interact with the sample. So, this is a sample surface and whole this is sample here, right. So, it goes into the deeper part also. So, the surface is at this point here, right. This is surface. Now, this is the incoming electron beam. So, you know that when this electron beam interact with the surface, so the Auger electrons are coming out of the sample from near surface area. You see the Auger electrons, they comes out within the few nanometer portion of the top surface, and these electrons, if we analyze, they gives rise to the AES technique, Auger electron spectroscopy, and you know that it is very powerful technique to characterize the sample surface. Now, if the electron beam, incoming electron beam, it is able to penetrate into deeper part, maybe 5 to 50 nanometer, we get secondary electron, and if it goes further interior part of the sample, then we get backscattered electron. And we know that these electrons, they are used in development of scanning electron microscope, right. That is very powerful technique for the characterization of materials. But today we are discussing about the X-rays which comes out of material because of this interaction with the electron beam. So, X-rays are produced from this part, right. So, that green part, these lines which I am drawing here, so that portion generates the X-rays, right. So, you can say that this EMP is not a true surface technique, because these X-rays, from where they are coming, they are emitted from within the sample volume. You can see the X-rays are coming from this portion, right. So, the secondary electron or backscattered electron, they were coming near surface area, and Auger electrons were coming out of the material just from the top surface itself. So, that way you can say that the X-ray is coming out from the deeper part of the sample, not from the surface portion. So, it is not a true surface technique. Another important thing is that the electron beam, you see this is the incoming electron beam. So, this electron beam diameter may be about 1 micrometer or something like this, right. So, the diameter of beam is very small. So, what we expect that the resolution which we get using this interaction, that resolution is also nearly 1 micrometer at least. But you see, in case of Auger electrons, this signal is coming out from this much portion, and this portion, if you see its lateral dimension, it is almost equal to the diameter of beam. But when we talk about the X-rays which are coming out in this EMP technique, so the X-rays are coming from wider portion. So, it is from, you see, this much. So, if this beam is about 1 micrometer, then it is like 5 to 10 micrometer something. It is a much bigger portion which is generating the X-rays. So, you can say that the electron beam diameter in EMP is about 1 micrometer or less, but the emitted X-rays, they originate from a larger area, you see, much larger than the beam diameter area, right. So, EMP does not have high resolution which is associated with Auger electron spectroscopy. So, the resolution is not that much high. But remember, I am repeating this thing again, the X-rays which comes out of the material because of interaction with the electron beam, so their energy is the characteristics of the element from which they originate, and that is why the X-rays can be used to identify the element which is present here in the sample material. Now, detection of X-ray signals, or you can say that we have to understand the implementation of electron microprobe equipment. Now, this EMP, this technique usually is a part of scanning electron microscope equipped with appropriate X-ray detectors. It means this equipment contains almost all components which are present in the scanning electron microscope. What was present in the scanning electron microscope? The first requirement is that ultra high vacuum is necessary, because we are working with the electron beam, we have to produce the electrons, then we have to focus the electrons, we have to scan the electrons on the sample surface, and because of this interaction, the signal which comes out, that also have to be transported to the detectors, and we have to avoid the contamination also. So we need ultra high vacuum conditions for the implementation of electron microprobe equipment also. But the difference here is that we have to add X-ray detectors also. In case of scanning electron microscope, normally we have secondary electron detector and backscattered electron detector, but if we add X-ray detectors also, it is possible to achieve this EMP function in the scanning electron microscope. So you can say that we can add this function to the scanning electron microscope by adding the X-ray detectors also. And now the X-rays can be detected by the two techniques. So you know that the X-rays are electromagnetic waves, so they have energy and they have wavelength. So we can use the two ways to detect the X-rays. So one is this energy dispersive spectrometer. In this we detect the energy of the X-rays, and through the energy we identify the element which is generating the X-rays. The second way is that instead of energy, we focus on the wavelength of the X-rays, and through the wavelength we try to identify the elements. Now these two kind of detectors, either of these two can be added into the system. So you can see here the implementation or the block diagram is something like this. So here this electron beam, this is the incoming electron beam signal, right, and it is interacting in this portion with the sample, and when this electron beam is falling on this sample and it is interacting with the sample, X-rays are emitted. Now if we are implementing this EDS, energy dispersive spectrometer, it is shown on the left side, and this WDS, wavelength dispersive spectrometer, that is shown on the right side. So suppose we are working with the energy dispersive spectrometer. So in that case what happens, because of the interaction of electron beam with the sample, X-rays will be emitted, and these X-rays will be detected by a detector here, and it's like cooled detector, and the detector will generate electrical signal corresponding to the energy of the X-rays, and then we supply it to the electronics part, and through that the analysis of that signal we identify the energy or different energies of the X-rays which are coming out of the sample, and that way we identify the element. In case of WDS, wavelength dispersive spectrometer, we have a crystal, and that crystal is used to identify the wavelengths which are coming out of the sample, wavelength of X-rays, and once we identify the wavelengths, we can identify the element which is producing those wavelengths. So the working of these two detectors, energy dispersive spectrometer and wavelength dispersive spectrometer. So we are going to discuss these two spectrometer in more detail in the coming slides. So this is one picture of EMP, electron microprobe setup, which is used in some laboratory. It's a very sophisticated equipment, and all this chamber you see, it's high vacuum chamber. So now let's discuss this energy dispersive spectrometer technique for detecting the X-rays. So here you see the X-rays which are generated by a sample when the sample surface is interacting with the incoming electron beam. So because of that interactions, X-rays will generate, and the wavelength, or you can say the energy of this X-ray, depend upon the presence of elements into the material. Now the whatever material is there, that material will generate some X-rays, and these X-rays, they are going to the detector. So what is this detector? So this detector is actually a material or a structure which have a space charge region. So this space charge region will receive the X-rays, and the electron hole pair will generate here, and once electron hole pair generate here, a current will flow into the detector. A bias voltage is applied here. So the current which flows here in this detector circuit, that will produce an output signal. So the output signal will be produced in response to a incoming X-rays. Now this energy dispersive spectrometer, that is routinely used technique in case of EMP, because it is simpler than WDS. Wavelength dispersive spectrometer is a little difficult to implement, so that is why most of the time you will see that this energy dispersive spectrometer with this kind of arrangement is used. Now here in this what happens, so I told you that there is a space charge region, and this space charge region is implemented with the help of a reverse biased semiconductor diode. This diode may be a pin diode or it may be a Schottky diode, and the semiconductor material may be silicon or germanium, right. So a space charge region is created by producing a reverse biased junction here, right, and the X-rays will produce here the electron hole pair in this reverse biased region, or you can say in this space charge region. Now according to one estimate, when an electron beam of energy 30 kilo electron volt falls on the sample surface, and this detector is 1.1 electron volt band gap material, you know this material is silicon. So when this electron beam falls on the detector of made of silicon having band gap 1.1 electron volt, you know how many electron hole pairs are generated? About 9,000 electron hole pairs are generated here, right. Now if the X-rays are emitted by a different element, then its energy will be different and different number of electron hole pairs will be generated here. So you can see this kind of arrangement. This arrangement shows not only the detector part, but the sample part is also shown here. So this is a electron beam which falls on the sample. So when this electron beam interacts here with the sample, you see here two X-rays are shown here. So maybe these two X-rays corresponds to the two different elements which are present into the sample. So suppose this A is corresponding to this red color X-ray is corresponds to an element A, and this blue color X-ray is produced because of presence of element B into the sample. So suppose only two elements are present here into the sample, corresponding to these two elements, two different X-rays are emitted. These two X-rays, because they are characteristic feature of the element which is generating these X-rays, so they have different energies, A and, or you can say different wavelength. So A and B, two X-rays, they are of different wavelength, or you can say they are of two different energies. So because of two different energy, they will produce here two different number of electron hole pairs. So A will produce a fixed number of electron hole pair per photon. So depending on the efficiency of detector, the B will produce a different number of electron hole pair for the same detector material, again depending on the efficiency of the detector material. Now these two pulses, two current pulses will be generated here, or you can say two signals will be generated because of two incoming X-rays from the sample surface, right. And with the help of the electronic circuit or the electronic assembly which is present here into the system, these two pulses, they are separated and they are plotted on the energy domain like this. So here you can see this A pulse was corresponding to A element, and this B pulse, this blue color corresponds to B element, right. So the presence of these two peaks at two different energies, it is indication that the two different elements may be present here, or it is also possible that these two different X-ray signals are produced because of a single element, because you have seen in the earlier slide that it is in a single element also there is a possibility of multiple transitions from L to K or from M to K and so on. So in order to identify those facts, we have to see what is the energy of these pulses. and only then we can identify whether these two pulses are from the same element or these two energy pulses are from two different elements. Now the wavelength dispersive spectrometer. So in the earlier slide you have seen energy dispersive spectrometer type detector arrangement for the X-rays. So now we will see the wavelength dispersive spectrometer. You know that the X-rays which comes out of the sample material because of interaction with the electron beam have different wavelengths, because these X-rays are originated because of different kind of transitions. So they have different wavelengths. So we must identify the wavelength of the X-rays, and for identification of the wavelength of X-rays we use this type of crystal arrangement. You know that in this crystal arrangement, in the crystal structure, there is atomic layer, and this is second atomic layer, and D is the spacing between the two atomic layers. And if X-rays or if a wavelength or if a signal having wavelength lambda falls on it, then the radiations are diffracted, and they follow the Bragg's law. The law says that the condition, this particular condition has to be fulfilled. So if a single wavelength is coming here, so it will produce a constructive pattern, a constructive interference pattern, right? And this condition will be satisfied here, and the theta is the angle of you can say diffraction. So with the help of this Bragg's law, it is possible to identify different wavelengths which are coming out from the sample, because they will produce a different constructive interference pattern at different value of theta. Now changing the crystal angle selects different wavelength. So if we change the angle, means if we rotate the sample, then this constructive pattern will form at different position. So that way it is possible to select the different wavelengths which are coming out. Now you can see here, so when electron beam is falling here on the sample, so two different X-rays are coming out. So I told you these two different X-rays may be from the same element, or they may come out from different element also. But here for simplicity, let's assume that this is coming out from element A, this red one, and this blue one is coming out from element B, right? And these two X-rays having a different wavelength. Now this is the crystal. So when these two wavelengths are falling on the same crystal, on this crystal, now they will be deflected, or you can say diffracted to a different angle, right? So here you can see this crystal is same, so D is same. So if you are changing lambda, so the theta will change. So these two have different lambda. Suppose this red one is with lambda 1 and this blue one is with lambda 2. So if lambda is changing, then the theta will also change, because we need to satisfy this particular condition because of the Bragg's law. So you see here, these waves, they are diffracted at different angles, right? And since they are diffracted at different angles, so we have to place detectors at the right position. So once we know that what kind of element we expect into the sample, we have some idea that what will be the angle of diffraction. So according to that, we have to place the detectors here. So you can see that we can place multiple detectors depending on the type of elements which we want to detect, right? And one more thing is possible, that if we have a detector at a fixed position, so we may rotate this sample in order to satisfy this Bragg's condition, right? So we have to change the theta if this lambda is changing, right? So because of because of all this setup, it's possible to separate out the signal corresponding to different elements. So now you see here, this signal is there because of element A, and this signal, blue signal, is because of element B, because they are detected with the help of different detectors like this. Now this WDS, this wavelength dispersive spectrometer, has higher energy resolution. So this is the main advantage of wavelength dispersive spectrometer as compared to energy dispersive spectrometer. Why? Because only a small range of wavelength is detected at one time. You see here, so if we say that the detection which is taking place here at this detector, only single wavelength is detected here. And if we are detecting here at different angles, so again a single wavelength is detected. So at once we are focusing on one particular wavelength, while in case of energy dispersive spectrometer, so there was no such kind of wavelength selection possible. Now because we are selecting one wavelength at a time and we are detecting only that one, so it allows us to have a greater peak to background ratio, right? So because of that we get very good resolution in case of WDS. And it is also possible to get higher count rate for individual elements. So this peak is more distinct and more sharp in case of different elements. Now you can see here, so this WDS has higher resolution. Higher resolution you can see here. So the signal is plotted here as a function of energy. So this blue signal is obtained. So these signals, the red and blue, they are obtained from the same sample, and this blue signal is obtained with the help of WDS, and this red signal is obtained with the help of EDS. So if you see this WDS signal from the same sample, you can see that these blue peaks, they are two different peaks actually, because they corresponds to different transitions, and you can see here they correspond to different element also. One peak is from titanium, and this first peak is from barium, right? Here in the barium this is L alpha transition, and in titanium it is K alpha transition, but their energy is very close to each other. So in case of WDS it is possible to see these two peaks separately because of very good resolution. But if we see here EDS signal, so we get here only a single peak, because these two peaks are merging together and we are getting only single peak. So you can see it is difficult to identify these two elements, because we will see single peak and we will assume this single peak corresponding to the X-rays coming out of a single element. But actually if we look at WDS data, this peak is made of two different peaks, and these two different peaks are coming from two different elements. So if we use WDS, we get high resolution and it becomes more easy to identify the elements with more accuracy. In case of EDS, resolution is not that much high, so we may make wrong conclusions and we may miss certain elements which otherwise were present into the sample. So here also you can see here the two peaks, they will be seen as a single peak in EDS, right? So here we are comparing WDS, wavelength dispersive spectrometer, and energy dispersive spectrometer. So you can see that if we talk about the quantum efficiency, right? So the quantum efficiency is higher in case of EDS, energy dispersive spectrometry. If we see this quantum efficiency is higher, while in case of WDS this quantum efficiency is less than 30%. And what kind of elements we can detect? If we talk about WDS, we can detect elements whose atomic numbers are greater than 5. But in case of EDS, so it's possible to detect elements whose atomic number is higher than 6. And if we are using this barium window, right, then elements whose atomic number is greater than 11, only those elements can be detected. But in case of windowless system, it's possible to detect elements whose atomic number is greater than 6. Now if you talk about resolution, you see here, it depends of course on the crystal which we are using for the detection of the X-ray signal, but the resolution here is 5 electron volt. It means if we have two peaks and the gap between energy gap between the two peaks is 5 electron volt or near about, we can see them as a separate peaks. But in case of energy dispersive spectrometer, that resolution is energy dependent, and most of the time if the energy is 5.9 kilo electron volt, something like this resolution is about 150 electron volt, means the two peaks which we are getting at the output, they should have an energy gap of at least 150 electron volt. Only then we can see those peaks as a separate peaks, otherwise these peaks will merge together and it will appear to us that we are getting only single peak, means we are like there are chances that we make wrong conclusion, and we may miss certain elements which are present into the material. And if we see the data collection time in case of WDS is from minutes to hours, while in case of EDS it is in minutes only. It's justified because in case of WDS we focus at one particular wavelength at a time, then once we get the sufficient data at that particular wavelength, then we move to the next wavelength, then we move to the next wavelength. That wavelength selection can be made with the help of multiple detectors at different positions, or we can rotate the crystal. So that way that process takes time, because we are collecting data at one wavelength at a time, then we are changing the setup to get data at the different wavelength. While there is no such kind of complexity in case of EDS, so the data can be collected in a very small time. If you talk about sensitivity you see is much better in case of WDS as compared to EDS, right? So here this the sensitivity is less here, 0.01 to 0.1%, while in case of EDS it is 0.1 to 1%. So it's more sensitive as far as the sensitivity is concerned. As far as speed is concerned, the WDS is good, resolution is good here in WDS, and quantum efficiency is better in case of EDS. Quantum efficiency and sensitivity is higher in case of EDS. Resolution and resolution is better in case of WDS. Data collection is slow here in case of WDS. The data collection is good here. Here it is slow. That make this small correction. So here it is from minutes to hours, while in case of EDS it is in minutes. So the resolution is higher in case of WDS. All other parameters are better in case of EDS, right? So this is very difficult to implement, and this is very easy to implement. So that's why in most of the cases the EDS is there in the system. Now if you talk about the applications of EMP, so this is a rapid analysis of thin film and bulk sample, that which is possible in case of EMP, right? And the impurities are identified either using EDS or WDS by matching the experimental spectra to a known X-ray energy. So in the beginning we have a known X-ray energies from the standard samples, so that data is there in the form of a table, and then we characterize the sample, which is a known sample, we get its spectrum, and then we compare the peaks of this unknown sample with the peaks which are present there in the standard X-ray data, and that way we identify the type of element which is present into the sample. So the advantage of this technique is that this is non-destructive technique. The sample is not damaged in this process because we are using just X-rays. The trace impurities means the small number of impurities which are present into the sample, they can be detected in this technique, and two-dimensional information by scan beam. So if we have a sample here like this, so we can scan this sample with the help of electron beam. At each and every point during its interaction, X-rays are generated, and those X-rays will be analyzed to identify the impurities which are present in that particular portion, and that way we can have a two-dimensional profile of the sample surface, and from that profile we can see the distribution of impurities or other elements as a function of position. So if you talk about the limitations of EMP, so the detection of certain elements like carbon, oxygen and nitrogen is difficult because they produce very low X-ray yield, means when the electron beam fall on the material, and if carbon, oxygen and nitrogen atoms are present in the vicinity of that portion, then X-rays which comes out from these elements because of interaction with electron beam, the yield is very low, right? And since the yield of X-rays is low, it becomes difficult to detect the X-rays which are coming out of these. So we cannot identify or we cannot detect the presence of these elements in the sample. Now for elements whose atomic number is less than 10, the sensitivity is not that much good. The X-ray resolution is determined by the electron absorption volume and it's not by the E-beam size. So I told you in the second or third slide that the electron beam diameter may be much small, it's a few micrometer, but the X-ray signal is produced by a much larger volume or much larger area within the sample. So the resolution is decided by that electron absorption volume, not by the E-beam size. So I hope that electron microprobe working and its applications and the other information which is needed regarding EMP was there in the presentation. So if you have any doubt or any question, so you can discuss with me later. Thank you very much. Thank you.